So many of us are well versed in the Torah of Tevye the dairyman. His story begins: a fiddler on the roof. Sounds crazy, no? But here in our little village of Anatevka, our little village of Milwaukee, you might say every one of us is a fiddler on the roof, trying to scratch out a pleasant, simple tune without breaking his neck. It isn't easy, you may ask. Why do we stay up there if it's so dangerous? Well, we stay because Anatevka is our home. And how do we keep our balance? That I can tell you in a word: tradition. Because of our traditions, we've kept our balance for many, many years. Here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything: how to sleep, how to eat, how to work, how to wear clothes. For instance, we always keep our heads covered and we always wear a prayer shawl. This shows our constant devotion to God. You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know, but it's tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who she is and what God expects her to do. There's some truth in our friend Tevye's words. As Jews, we know what is expected of us. We live by certain rhythms of time. We eat and we don't eat certain foods, and we hold ourselves to a very demanding moral code. This week in Torah, we read a double portion, Acharei Mot Kiddushin. In this double portion, we find what is known as the Holiness Code. God tells us that God is holy, and so we should be holy too. Then we find a laundry list of mitzvot, of commandments or rules. This is where Tevye is a little bit wrong. The rhythms of time, the laws about food, the moral codes, they're all traced to Torah, and many of them are traced to this holiness code in particular. In his book, The Bedside Torah, Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson asks the following question about the nature of the holiness code, about the nature of mitzvot overall. He asks, do we observe the rules of Torah simply because they are rules, or is the Torah authoritative because it directs us on how to attain a sacred and meaningful Jewish life? In other words, do we follow the laws set out for us simply because it's tradition, or do we follow our sacred traditions in order that we might live richer, fuller, more meaningful lives as individuals and as a community? Unsurprisingly, the answer exists within the Holiness Code itself. God says, you shall keep my laws and my rules, v'chai bahem, by which human beings shall live. I am Adonai. These ancient rabbis pick up on the subtlety, v'chai bahem. Human beings shall live by these laws, these rules, these traditions. The text does not say that human beings shall die by them. Rabbi Leo Beck teaches, in order to observe the other commandments, the great commandment is that we must live. And so, to answer the question, we follow our sacred traditions so that we can live richer, fuller, more meaningful lives. The traditions are not the end, rather, they are the means to the end. And sometimes, even our most sacred traditions must be broken in order to preserve life. For some of us, it is challenging to stay away from the synagogue, from our beautiful sanctuary, and more importantly, from the community that we encounter there. And for many of us, it is even more challenging to stay away from visiting those among us who are ill, and even more so to stay away from the Shiva houses in our communities. Could any of us have imagined that to be able to comfort the mourners among us with a hug or with our presence would be impossible? And yet, Torah is very clear here. In order one day to again be able to live by these sacred traditions, traditions that add richness, texture, and fullness to our lives, we need to be living. In a way, we are all fiddlers on the roof. Life is fragile. We know this all too well. How do we keep our balance? Right now, it's not by tradition alone. We keep our balance by preserving life, v'chai bahem. First, v'chai, we need to live, so that we can one day again fulfill all of these mitzvot with a renewed sense of purpose and meaning. Wishing you and your family an early Shabbat Shalom.